What's going on, guys? James back again, and today I wanted to bring you another video, and this one is going to be my favorite video games ever. Let's get into it. Present day James here. I'm not going to pretend like this is me in the past. This is going to be a 2021 remake of that original video from 2014, but this one is going to be a little bit different than when I recreated the first video I ever made. This one is, I'm going to show you what my favorite video games were at the time, and then I'm going to do what my favorite video games now would be as of 2021.
NCAA Football 11, 2009. Here is Madden, NFL 11, SmackDown vs. Raw, 2009, SVR, 2010, NCAA Football, 2013, Guitar Hero, World Tour, Rock Band, the Rock Band Track Pack, Madden 2005, Madden 13, WWE 2K14, TNA Impact the video game, Infamous 2, Jak and Daxter the Precursor Legacy, Jak 2, Thievius Raccoonus, Band of Thieves, the Ratchet and Clank Collection on the PS3, Pitfall the Lost Expedition, the Naruto Ultimate Ninja series.
But the first thing that I do have to talk about, and it's a big one, the first thing I have to talk about, of course, is the WWE Games franchise, because, I mean, it's one of the most important gaming franchises to me. I started off playing the WWE games on Valentine's Day 2010. It was the very first time I played a wrestling game. It was SmackDown vs. Raw 2010. And since then, like I've said before, on both channels, I've played pretty much every game under the sun. Besides those really early titles, I played almost everything. I played stuff with Fire Pro. I played like all the spin-off titles like Crush Hour and All Stars and Legend of WrestleMania and stuff like that. If it's in the main franchise WWE games from WWF SmackDown to the current games, like I played it all. I love the franchise. I love wrestling. Fan of pro wrestling since 2006. Been playing since 2010, as I've already said. Amassed this big collection of games, which I've already talked about in the past, and once I get to it, you should have a video coming out all about that, so I won't go in depth here. The next thing to say, I guess, is to talk about some of my favorite games, favorite wrestling games. And some of my favorites are SmackDown Here Comes the Pain, SmackDown vs. Raw 2006, 2010, WWE All-Stars, WWE 2K14, and WWE 2K19. And I also have a massive soft spot in my heart for the PS3 and 360 version, the last-gen version of WWE 2K16, because that is where me uploading content really got started. I mean, obviously I had been making content since 2014, so well before the game came out. And like I've said before, my original plan was to always be a Let's Play channel, and that's what I'm going to try and do a little bit on here, is have just gameplay on this channel and have all sorts of other geek-related stuff on the other channel. But yeah, it's like, I have a massive soft spot in my heart for 2K16 because if it wasn't for that game, I think I've said it before in my year-end review, I'll put a link in the description, but if it wasn't for 2K16 on the PS3, I don't think I would even be making videos anymore. I think I would have just eventually stopped, having not found a real passion for it. But me coming up with the idea that I had for the original universe mode, it kept me making videos. It gave me something to be passionate about, and I love everything about video making now more than ever, even if I'm still trying to get back into being consistent, because that is still a problem from all of 2020 not being good in terms of content for me. And again, I talked about that in the year review on the other channel, link in the description to it. But yeah, so I'll always love that game too, honorable mention to it. Though it's not one of my favorites in the franchise, I'll always love it. But that's not too much else to say really about the WWE games. I don't want this video to be super long or anything. But those are just some of my favorites and kind of my history in a very brief sense with the WWE games, and why I'll always love that franchise. But next up Next up is Life is Strange. Now, I've never played a game like Life is Strange before November of 2017. But out of the blue one day, I decided to borrow the game, and I loved it. I just loved everything about it. The story, the characters, the world, the atmosphere, the everything. Before this point, I honestly can't think of another game that really resonated with me in the same way. Since finishing Life is Strange, I've played its prequel, Life is Strange Before the Storm, Life is Strange 2, and Life is Strange 2's demo, The Awesome Adventures of Captain Spirit. Donut has also become one of my favorite developers, and I highly would recommend playing their second to most recent release, Tell Me Why, which released in September 2020. If you have a PC or an Xbox, and even remotely liked any of the Life is Strange games, I definitely think you should play Tell Me Why. Just because it takes all those gameplay systems that they really were working on in all of Life is Strange, and really almost perfects it. The story, I wouldn't say the story is as like emotional as the first Life is Strange. I don't think they've released anything that truly gets there. But I also haven't finished their most recent title, Twin Mirror. I haven't finished that game, and I really need to get back to it. But Tell Me Why is fantastic, and it really is good for representation for what it does. It has a trans character without that being their only character. It's a part of their character because it's who they are, but it's not the focus of the game by any means. It's really nice. But yeah, it's really cool, and I highly recommend playing it. The story is really good, and they don't get like overly preachy on anything. Highly recommend. But along with stuff that's like Life is Strange, I want to give just a kind of a quick shout out to some other games, like What Remains of Edith Finch and Firewatch. I love both of them and highly recommend them. And another quick shout out are to some of the Quantic Dream games, but for me specifically, Beyond Two Souls and Detroit Become Human. I know like Heavy Rain was their first really big hit. It's one that I can see why people liked it for the time, but I cannot get into it. But I really like Beyond Detroit and would highly recommend both of those as well. Next up is going to be a few franchises that I mentioned in the original video that I've already remade, and hopefully you would have watched that before this. And those franchises are Jak and Daxter, Ratchet & Clank, and Sly Cooper. Now, because I've talked about those, and I do plan to talk about those even more in depth in the future, I'm not going to go anywhere near as in depth here. I love all three of those franchises, and if you want to hear me talk about them more, just wait for another video to come out, because I will be talking about all three, at least the original trilogies for all three, in more depth. But other than that, I do want to give another quick shout out to Insomniac Games' 2014 title Sunset Overdrive, that was originally an Xbox exclusive, but then eventually made its way to PC. I really love that game. I got a chance to play it in 2020 for the first time ever, and I had a really good time with it. The story was just kind of like wacky, but the gameplay felt really nice, and even if even if you haven't really heard good things about the story or anything, if you like Insomniac, I'd say give it a shot based purely on the gameplay alone. And who knows, maybe you'll like the story. But yeah, I definitely recommend it, Sunset Overdrive. Another game that I'm not going to talk about a lot is Pitfall: The Lost Expedition. Now, this is a game that I've always loved. It goes all the way back to my childhood. It's one of the few games I truly remember being like a little kid playing. I'm just extremely nostalgic for it, and I can't fully explain why. Maybe I'll eventually look into trying to do like a fully scripted video or something for that. But yeah, I love Pitfall: The Lost Expedition, and would love to see some sort of like remake or remaster on current hardware or something for it, because I think it could be a really cool game if redone. I mean, I still love it now, but yeah, I think if redone, it could really be a big thing. And who knows, maybe start to go back and scratch some itches for people who are maybe wanting a new Uncharted game or something. But yeah, Pitfall: The Lost Expedition. Love that. The next thing I want to show my love for is the Insane Trilogy remakes of the original Crash Bandicoot trilogy. Crash was a series that I really didn't play growing up, but I quickly got into it despite the difficulty in the first game when I played the Insane Trilogy back in 2017. It was almost strangely addicting, and I kind of understand why people call it the Dark Souls of platforming. Dark Souls has that sort of addictive quality to it, where if you get it, you want to keep trying until you make your way through to the end. Crash, for me at least, has that same kind of feeling, and I can't fully explain it, but the more that I played it, the more I wanted to get to the end, despite, on certain levels, just dying repeatedly, and it felt like I wouldn't accomplish anything. I wanted to keep playing despite all that. But another thing I do want to quickly shout out is Spyro the Dragon. Now, Spyro is a series that I've always been really interested in, and admittedly, it's one that I need to put more time into, because I have the Reignited trilogy. I played a little bit of it, love it, but I haven't got all the way through any of the games on there yet. So it's one that I want to put more time into, and just I'll eventually get there. But it's one that I've always loved because the idea of a cute purple dragon burning things and running around is just great. Anyway, I feel like it's probably a criminal sin to not mention Mario anywhere, so I will mention I've always had a big respect for the Super Mario series and what it's done for gaming. I'm not the biggest Mario fan by any means, but I do love games like Super Mario World, Super Mario Sunshine, Mario Kart, and Mario Party, just to name a few. But other than that, there's not too much else to say. I just feel like I have to mention Mario in there. And I do want to quickly mention actually some Ubisoft titles, specifically the Splinter Cell franchise and Assassin's Creed. As someone who loves both history and literature, I really respect both franchises, even if Splinter Cell is essentially a dead franchise now, and Assassin's Creed is far from the franchise that made me interested in it to begin with. There's still franchises that I feel I should mention. What's next? Some games that are superhero based. Kind of. This is where I'm going to mention Deadpool, Infamous, as a franchise that is, and Marvel's Spider-Man. Honestly, I don't think I really need to give more than that, especially not for Deadpool and Spider-Man. I think all of you understand what makes both of those great. And Infamous is a series that I find really interesting because it comes from truly one of my favorite developers of all time. I love Sucker Punch Productions. I love the work on Sly Cooper. I love Infamous. And I'm really intrigued by Ghost of Tsushima. And just like I said with Spyro, it's one that I know I need to put a little more time into, and I will at some point, just not now. But yeah, Infamous, I love that as a franchise. I need to put more time to the first game, but I finished Infamous 2, liked that. I finished Second Son, liked that, even though I admit I do think Cole's story is a little bit better than Delsin's, but I still liked both games just fine. But I will say there's just 3 more games or franchises that I want to mention. The next 2 are Uncharted and Tomb Raider. For Tomb Raider, I'm specifically talking about the 3 most recent games: Tomb Raider 2013, Rise of the Tomb Raider, and Shadow of the Tomb Raider. Though admittedly, I haven't played Shadow yet, so I can't really talk about that one. We're trying to craft Lara's origin story, and I like what they were doing, even though at times the dreaded ludonarrative dissonance definitely was kind of a thing, with Lara's too scared to kill someone in a cutscene, but in gameplay you're killing everyone, you know? Yeah, sometimes I can understand where people come from with that. I don't fully agree with it. I think that term is just kind of stupid overall. It's like, again, I get it, but most of the time when people are talking about it, it comes off like just a massive nitpick, and they're not actually, it's not like a genuine thing. And okay, maybe they do genuinely feel that way about it, but I don't know, like, most of the time when people talk about it, it just comes off as a giant nitpick. At least to me, anyway. But I could be misinterpreting that. But overall, with Uncharted, I really like the story and how Naughty Dog took, like, real myths and turned them into video games. Because if you look it up, the whole thing with, like, the Chintamani Stone, that actually is a real myth based in history. So it's kind of cool that they took that and made it a thing. They're pretty fun to play too, honestly. I love Uncharted. It's one of my favorite franchises of all time, as I'm talking about it here. And with Tomb Raider, for me at least, it's more about the gameplay than the story, honestly. And that's not to say that the stories are bad by any means, because they're not. But there's just so much more Lara can do in gameplay than Nate can do, and it just feels more natural to move Lara, and I do appreciate that. But the last thing I want to talk about is one of my favorite games of all time, The Last of Us. I'm not going to talk about part 2 or anything to do with it right now. That's a topic for another time entirely. I just want to talk about The Last of Us, the year-long journey taken by Joel and Ellie. It's a game that I've played 5 times. I've loved it every time. It's a game that no matter how many times you play it, you're likely to get emotional every time. While the gameplay really is more of a basic third-person cover-based shooter with some more basic stealth mechanics, the game uses its mechanics to make the gameplay loop interesting enough to keep you engaged until the next cutscene. The gameplay really is a jack-of-all-trades, master of none, and I don't intend for that to be an insult by any means. It does a lot of things well, but there are games that do very specific things even better. The one thing that most people won't argue is that the story is why the game is so amazing. If you haven't played it and have any sort of interest in it, play it. At least try it. That's all that I can say. At least try it. Again, part 2, I know that's very divisive, and I will play through it again. I've completed it once. I want to play through it again, do it on the channel, and then talk more about it. But again, that's the story for a different time. But I want to do a quick recap of what I think and what my list of favorite games now are that I want to talk about. Of course, WWE games, have to talk about that. I love wrestling, been a fan since 2006, been playing the games since 2010, love all of that. So it's a franchise I have to talk about, the WWE games franchise. Particularly the main franchise, but the spin-off games and Fire Pro and stuff like that, they're great. Life is Strange and What Remains of Edith Finch, Firewatch, Quantic Dreams games, anything that can, I guess, be classified as a walking simulator. A lot of those games I love, and I really get into the stories of. Particularly though, Life is Strange is the big one to talk about there. Though I really do love What Remains of Edith Finch and Firewatch, and the Quantic Dream games aren't too bad either. Jak and Daxter, Ratchet & Clank and Sly Cooper. I've talked about it before. I'll talk about it again. Not going to go into it too much. Pitfall: The Lost Expedition is a game that, again, I'm super nostalgic for. I always love it. I think it could be great if redone now. And I might even try and do a Let's Play of it at some point, but yeah. It's a game that I'm just nostalgic for and I love. Crash Bandicoot and Spyro always deserve thumbs up from anyone, from me. They always get that. Of course, you have to mention Mario. Stuff like Splinter Cell and Assassin's Creed. Genuinely, I do kind of like just Ubisoft as a developer and publisher. They're not perfect by any means, not by a long shot, but a lot of their stuff I do think has some good merits to it. Infamous, Deadpool, Spider-Man, superhero kind of stuff. Really like that stuff. Uncharted, Tomb Raider, and The Last of Us. Particularly just games in that same kind of vein, the more story-driven, cinematic, third-person games. Really love that stuff. I really do. But again, that's really all I've got to say. And until next time, I'll see you later. Bye, guys.